Trump said that they are seeking, the U.S. is seeking to destroy Iran's navy and its ballistic missile capability. So that means obviously sinking all their ships, and also not just destroying the platforms that launch the missiles, but also the facilities where the missiles are produced. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, because Iran's missile production facilities and their launch platforms are fortified underground. So just like the complications with the nuclear program and the nuclear complex, these sites at Fordo and Natanz, where the centrifuges are buried under mountains and buried under the ground, it's the same story with the missiles. They have basically built entire cities fortified underneath the ground. And just look at a topographical map of Iran. It's all mountains. They build these cities underneath the ground, underneath thousands of feet of earth. And this makes it very difficult to destroy these completely and then to verify that the production facilities have been destroyed. And so even though Israel claims that these joint operations have destroyed half of Iran's ballistic missile launch platforms, it's an open-ended question whether we will be able to destroy all of them. And that raises some serious questions. But before we get into the missile aspect of the equation, because let's just say succinctly, for the sake of argument right now, the two strategic objectives here are regime change and destroying the missile launch capability. We'll talk about regime change first. This is maybe the most controversial operative word in this entire conflict, and maybe in the second Trump administration. Because historically, what a regime change means is that you kill the leader and you replace them with a different leader, and that new leader brings all his people in, and you just get a new country and you realign the country. So like in Iraq, we invaded, we put Saddam Hussein on trial, we executed him, we put all of his lieutenants on trial, we killed them, we killed all the remnant of the Ba'athist force, and others of them were integrated or re-educated. And now they have a democratic regime as opposed to a Ba'athist regime. And the same thing happened in Syria. We backed proxies in Syria, we dropped tons of ordnance, we overthrew the Ba'athist Assad regime, and in its place is now a Sunni theocracy, effectively. We actually don't know the character of the new regime, but this new character, Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as al-Julani, he is now in charge. He is a Sunni Muslim. It appears that he is reorienting Syria away from the fascist, pan-Arab, socialist ideology of Baathism and towards something like, I'm not even quite sure what he's going for. They're maintaining a liberal structure, relatively liberal structure, but it is going to be a Muslim religious regime. All that being said, it's a completely new governing ideology, it's a new leader, and it's a new security apparatus. That is historically what regime change means in the Middle East. But with Trump, it's a little bit different, because like we talked about with Venezuela, when Trump went into Venezuela in January, he did not actually have a real regime change. It appears that way, and it seems that way. Trump kidnapped Nicolas Maduro, who was the head of state and head of government, the president of Venezuela. And so people would say that appears to be a regime change operation because the head of state has been removed from power. However, you could argue this is more of like a hybrid approach. Even though Nicolas Maduro is no longer there, his vice president succeeded him and became president. Everybody else remained. It's the same cabinet, it's the same government, same defense minister, same intelligence minister, same interior minister, the vice president is now the president, same army, same intelligence operation, same security apparatus. And they still ostensibly are a socialist Chavista regime. So is it safe to say that that's regime change? Not quite. It's more like a decapitation strike. And it's using decapitation as a menu item, as a tool, maybe call it smart power, for persuasion. In other words, rather than go to war against Venezuela in a conventional sense, to destroy their military and put everybody on trial and find new leaders and create a democracy, instead we are picking off individuals in the government with these very surgical operations. I guess it's just the one, in the hopes that the successor will be more compliant to Washington. And so this is seen as a cost-effective, low-intensity way to reorient the posture of a hostile or revisionist country like Venezuela. And I think that in Iran, that is the same approach. So Trump laid out the case on Friday for a regime change. He said, this is a terrorist regime. They've been fighting us for years. They've killed Americans in Iraq and in Beirut and elsewhere. He said, so we're going to destroy their military. We want them to surrender. And then we want the people to rise up. Now, this is a little bit confusing because that would seem to indicate that he is talking about a full-fledged regime change, because if he's degrading Iran's armed forces so that an uprising can occur, well, that would tend to imply that there will be a new regime, that the people of Iran are going to take power and they're going to create some kind of popular government, like a democracy or a liberal regime, but it will not be the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. It will not be the Islamic Revolutionary Regime. It will be something else. So that's the message we got on Friday, and that's what it sounded like, was full-fledged regime change. We're going to take care of their big guns, the cannons, the Navy, the missiles, and once we're done, then the people can rise up and they can create a free and independent and liberal regime. It seems, though, that Trump has been walking that back. And now they're talking about a different kind of regime change where Trump is talking about there may be candidates from within the existing government that will succeed the government that has been destroyed. So after the Ayatollah was assassinated in the initial strikes on Saturday, a council has been convened to operate the government and try to maintain some continuity. And today they elected a new supreme leader, and they're trying to keep everything together. Trump says that every candidate he had in mind to lead the country has been killed. He says, and we're almost done killing all the leadership. There have been some reports that Trump's plan all along was to decapitate enough of the leadership, destroy enough of the military, that eventually an element from within the regime would somehow take power and then negotiate with the United States. Seeing that the military is destroyed, seeing that Iran is totally defenseless, and recognizing that they face certain death, Trump is anticipating that a pragmatic element is going to seize power and they will initiate negotiations and give the United States what they want. Now, to me, that sounds like what happened in Venezuela. That sounds like if that is coming from inside the regime, then it's not a real regime change. If you were talking about an uprising of the people, that is a whole different undertaking. And we aren't there. There's a lot of opposition to the regime in Iran, but they're not cohesive, and they're not armed or trained, and they're not organized. So there is no alternative force. When he says you're going to rise up and take the country back, that's not going to happen. For that to happen, it will not happen spontaneously. That is something that would require careful planning and money and arms and training and all sorts of things. They would need some legitimacy from the people. It isn't there. So when Trump says now, well, maybe we're waiting on somebody from inside the regime to take the reins and let common sense prevail, that sounds like what happened in Venezuela, which is that the regime will be intact at the end of this. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard will be intact. The Iranian armed forces will be intact. The Constitution, legislature, the structure, maybe even that they have a supreme leader, all of that will be intact. That's maybe the big idea. But like I said yesterday at the top of the show, this is a pure gamble. We don't know that that will happen. People say, is that going to happen? What are the odds it's going to happen? Frankly, nobody knows. Nobody has any idea because it is pure chaos. When you destroy the command, control, and communication of a country, you assassinate the supreme leader, you assassinate all their top military and civilian brass. What does the day after look like? Well, that actually depends upon the people that survive. And what do they decide to do? You don't really know. You're kind of gambling that they are going to see the light, so to speak. Now, here is why that seems to be unlikely. Here's why that's maybe a bad bet. Unlike Venezuela, Iran is a theocracy. It's built on a religion of martyrs. The Shiite Muslims, it's literally a religion of martyrs, and they have a theocratic religious government. So you have a regime, it's not just a huge regime of hundreds of thousands of loyalists that have been vetted, that have been tested, but it's also religious zealots. And the religious zealots their religion is based on dying for God. So this infrastructure, this security apparatus made up of jihadists, of people that are willing to die for their religion, for their theocracy, for their leader, they just witnessed the United States and Israel lie to them, kill their leader, kill their colleagues, their friends, maybe their families. And the expectation is that this is going to make them more compliant. It would seem to be the case that it's more likely they will be emboldened and actually get a more hardline faction. Because what is the logic? The remnant, the survivors are going to say, see, you can't trust the United States. They tricked us. They killed us. This was inevitable. If anything, you're going to get hardliners in place. And Trump has basically admitted this. And we'll get into this in a moment, what the outcome is in that case. But Trump admitted this today. He said in the Oval Office, we actually might get a more hardline regime. He said that is going to be the worst case scenario. So that's the regime change angle. You're either going to get a regime change, a true regime change, and that is going to entail some kind of ground force. That's going to entail, you're talking about a popular uprising, which isn't there. It's going to be some kind of sectarian group or ethnic group, a separatist group, something like that, that again will need to be armed and organized. Or you're looking at a decapitation strike that eventually results in compliance. And I think at this point that is very far-fetched. Now, the other strategic objective is destroying the ballistic missile capability. So not only do we seek the termination of the Iranian regime, but also we want to destroy all the missiles. And why is that? The missiles are the only military capability that allow Iran to hit any strategic assets among our allies. They are going to have no air force, no navy, no nothing. The proxy network is in shambles. All they have are these missiles, and that is what they can use to hit Saudi Arabia. That is what they can use to hit ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and they can hit airports and tourist destinations in the Gulf countries, and of course, U.S. bases and Israel. So a big part of the push to war was about disarming Iran and making it so that they're not able to do this. Well, once again, many complications, because you can't actually bomb all their ballistic missiles. We don't know where they are. All of them, many of them are highly mobile. This is the same problem we faced in Yemen. Last year in 2025, we launched a month-long war against the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and we had a carrier strike group off the coast, and we launched tons of airstrikes, and we hit them really hard. Same story. And we had literally no ability to prevent them from launching missiles. No effect. Think about that. In 1 month, we dropped more ordnance on the Houthis in Yemen than Joe Biden did in a year and a half. And it had no effect. And you might have heard about a year ago, aircraft carriers had to swerve to avoid being hit by missiles so sharply that planes were falling off the deck of the carrier. And we had, at the very end, to say, we surrender. Trump got up and said, I respect the Houthis. This isn't working. We're out. And to this day, the Houthis maintain the ability to launch the missiles. And the reason being is because the missile launch platforms are mobile. They're mobile. They're hard to detect with surveillance. And you have to destroy all of them. If Iran has any ability to launch ballistic missiles, and they have a lot of them, according to U.S. assessments from the Defense Intelligence Agency, they have the widest, biggest, most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East. If you're going to do it, you got to destroy all of them. What happens if you don't? Well, again, the state of the play is that we are bombing them. We are trying to simply drop enough bombs that they submit. It's a very blunt tool, very blunt weapon. Iran is retaliating with missiles. Now, the equation that everybody is talking about with regard to the missiles is that Iran's ballistic missiles are much cheaper than the interceptor missiles that we use to shoot them down. And we need multiple interceptors per missile. And the interceptors do not have a 100% interception rate. We also produce them much more slowly, and these are spread out across the entire world. So think about all these variables here. Iran has tons of cheap supplies, cheap missiles. They're very inexpensive to make, and they're blasting them off. And we really have no ability to prevent them from launching all their missiles. And these missiles are raining down every day against a wide array of targets across the entire region. Hezbollah is launching them against Cyprus in the Eastern Med. Iran is launching them against Israel, but also against Jordan and northern Iraq and Riyadh and Bahrain and the Emirates and Qatar and Oman. The whole region is being hit with missiles, and the ships in the Persian Gulf are being hit with missiles. Now, if you are trying to intercept these missiles, you can only deploy a finite number of systems to protect a finite number of targets. The detection, early warning, and interception, it's a smaller radius. So you have to deploy systems in all these different places. You can't leave Saudi Arabia out to dry, because what happens if missiles start hitting the Eastern Province oil fields? You got a big problem. You can't leave the Emirates hanging out to dry, because what happens if they destroy Dubai? Obviously can't leave Israel hanging out to dry. And this is not even talking about the cargo ships in the Persian Gulf or the U.S. military personnel and facilities. So we're spread very thin. We're spread thin in the Middle East. We also have these systems in Asia in preparation for China's invasion of Taiwan. We have them in Europe to shoot down Russian drones, missiles, projectiles. So we're spread very thin. And even the resources we have, we can't replenish them easily. So we're using years worth of interceptor supplies in a matter of days. You're not going to see as many built for another 5-10 years. Then you have to factor in the cost. Iran is making them not just more quickly, and they don't just have more of them, and they're only using them in one theater of conflict, but also they're much cheaper. They're far cheaper, and you only need one to get through. Interceptors, you need to launch 2 or 3. You need to launch multiple per missile. Not all of the missiles are going to be shot down. And so if the interception rate is 86%, as it was in the war last year, that's a significant number of missiles that might be getting through. And if the war drags on for weeks or months, it becomes a war of attrition. Who is going to run out first? Are we going to run out of our very finite